Okay, hello. Today I have Kaz on my channel. She's been kind enough to come on. And today we're going to talk about exercise and having to give it up when you are in true and proper recovery. And I know for Kaz it was a bit of a struggle and really hard to finally make the decision to finally just do it. And like myself, exercise was a huge component of my eating disorder and a really big decision that I had to make to go cold turkey. But I felt like once I did, my recovery really truly started. Things started shifting once I finally committed to that. And so on my channel, I have a lot of people who struggle with that same thing and ask a lot of questions. How did you do it? How long did you go cold turkey for? What got you through like that discomfort? And what was it like when you finally stopped? So Kaz is here and she's going to share her experience. And I'm going to turn the time over to you now, Kaz, to kind of just talk about your experience with this.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So I'll sort of give a bit of a background because I wasn't always like very exercise heavy in my eating disorder. I got unwell when I was 13. And at that time, it was mostly just restricting. And any exercise that I did was sort of immediately compensating for if I'd eaten because my parents had made me eat, I'd go and do squats or something. But it was just like the sort of typical anorexic behavior that you see lots of kids doing when they're unwell. But it wasn't ever something that was like gave me a feeling of being good about myself. So it was very easy for that to stop as I got sort of better later in my teens. But I guess what I never worked on throughout all of my sort of teenage years having an eating disorder was dealing with feelings of distress and uncomfortableness. So eventually I gained weight. That was mostly through like family-based therapy. And I gained weight because I wanted to go to uni. But I never sort of dealt with the fact that I felt bad about myself and I wasn't restricting. So I had all these emotions that I'd never had to deal with before, like from the age of 13 to 18, I'd avoided all that like puberty angst. So that came back in full force and I was left not knowing what to do with it, feeling like really out of control. And so I struggled with like a lot of anxiety and self-harm for a long time. And I realized fairly early on that exercising was actually really good at regulating my emotions. Like I would exercise because then I wasn't feeling as bad about myself. And in my head at the time, it was so positive. I was like, well, it's great to exercise. Exercise is a really healthy thing to do. It's stopping me from hurting myself. It's keeping me active. It's making me really healthy. But there was definitely an element of also I liked doing it because it kept me thin and it kept me lean and I felt good about myself because I was thin and lean. So that continued for years. So all throughout uni, I was very into weightlifting, bodybuilding, tracking my macros. And because I was away from my parents for the first time, I didn't have anyone sort of keeping me in check and saying, is it normal to eat like 5 meals of rice and chicken per day? So it was all very orthorexic and better than perhaps things were when I was underweight and constantly trying to lose weight as a child, but still wasn't like the full university experience. And that went on for a while and it sort of morphed and changed. And, you know, keto was a thing, veganism was a thing. And then I got a Fitbit and basically all of the like classical diet culture tropes I went through. And I didn't realize that things could be any different because I just felt like, well, I feel okay when I'm exercising. I feel terrible when I'm not exercising. So how can I change things? And that continued for a while until I'd finished uni. I was working and all throughout this time, it wasn't like going unnoticed. So my friends were like, why are you going to bed so early? And I was like, well, I've got to get up early in the morning to go to the gym. And partners would say, oh, I wish we could go out for dessert together. And just that was so impossible for me. Or like going to see family when I planned to go to the gym filled me with absolute dread. and that continued until the first lockdown, really, and the gym shut. And I went into absolute panic mode. I wasn't actually scared of the virus. I was scared of the fact that I couldn't go to the gym. And I was absolutely spiraling. And then around that time, I sort of found people on Instagram who had gone cold turkey on exercise and got it done like the all-in method. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. I don't know why, but I just never come across it. So yeah, in the start of 2020, I decided to start like coming out of quasi-recovery, because I sort of acknowledged that's what I'd been in. I'd been a healthy weight, but still very trapped by eating disorder rules. But I didn't address the exercise. I wasn't going to the gym, but I was still walking and still getting in my like required number of steps. And maybe I decided not to wear my Fitbit for a week, and then I put it back on straight away and made sure I made up for all the steps I'd lost the week before. So yeah, maybe I was eating more cakes and things, but I wasn't doing any of the rewiring for my exercise. And that actually precipitated a huge relapse in sort of the late summer, early autumn of 2020. And it fortunately didn't last for too long. I sort of really like jumped back into the eating disorder full force and became really miserable, but was able to stop the behaviors quite quickly. But then I realized that actually exercise is a huge deal still, because it had been a huge deal during that relapse. And I thought, well, if I'm either going to go back to living this like half recovered life and always risk relapsing, or I'm going to have to do the difficult thing and then finally get out of it. So that sort of brought me up to today, where I don't know, I feel like I'm in a pretty good place now with my relationship with exercise and with my body.
So just a couple questions there. When you finally decided like exercise is an issue here, like I've got to stop this, were you at a point where you were absolutely fed up with the exercise? Was it just so, did it turn into something that your anxiety was so high if you didn't get it done that it's kind of losing its effect or its benefit of like alleviating anxiety, to the point where the only reason you felt that alleviation from anxiety was after you finished it and felt like, oh, okay, this is done? Did you get to that point where you were just like, I don't want to live like this forever, feeling this need and this compulsion and this stress about getting my exercise in? Or were you in a place where you're still quite enjoying it, but just knew you kind of had to stop it to be able to fully recover?
A bit of both, actually. So there were definitely days when I was thinking, what is the point in this? This is like, pun not intended, but it was like being on a treadmill endlessly. I'm just exercising to get to the next day when I can exercise. And that was obviously horrific. But it wasn't every day like that. Some days I was like, I genuinely love this. I love going for runs in the countryside. I love like going for long walks. But you're right. I realized that I had to give it up temporarily in order to like have that long-term benefit, because even if you enjoy something, the eating disorder enjoys it as well. So I sort of had to starve the eating disorder in order to get my own brain back and be able to do stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah, and that's a great point you make. And I think that's really common, especially with people that I work with, is we'll have this conversation about how much they love exercise and they really enjoy it, and they found activities that are really fun, and they've got a social group and friends that they do it with. And I all of that, I'm not going to deny. I'm sure that these things are enjoyable, but does not doing it cause you anxiety? And the answer is always, that I find out that it does when I ask them to stop it. Right. And there's so much resistance, and it's like more than just like, oh, but I love it. I don't want to have to stop. It's like, I can't know what that reaction when you're told to stop is really going to kind of help you to know, is this a real compulsion? Is this something that's become a problem that I feel like I'm addicted to? And so, I think that is just really important to know. Just because you're enjoying it doesn't mean that it's not healthy. Like you said, you can love it and your eating disorder can love it at the same time. But if your eating disorder loves it, we have to stop it. And then you can bring it back once you've kind of rewired that compulsion, and you can love it again in a healthy way.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was like really silly things of like, I was working with someone who said, why don't we cut down the amount of times you go to the gym from 5 days to 3 days. And I was like, what, are you crazy? That's a terrible idea. That'll never work. And like, now I'm thinking, what's the big issue? But clearly just 2 days was too much for my eating disorder.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it won't work. Right. In your head, and this would happen to me too. And I'd question like, well, why can't I just cut down? You know, okay, so fine, I won't do it every day, but what if I do it every other day? And then I would try that, right? And I would find myself doing it for a couple of weeks. I was like, dude, I'm nailing this every other day. I'm normal now. I don't have to do it every day. And this is working. But it was only a matter of time before I started kind of slipping. And it was kind of like, oh, shoot. It's like, I kind of did it when I was supposed to today. Oh, well, I'll fix it. And then the next week,
3 days,
but I did that last time.
Yeah.
So now this week I got to do that extra day too. And then it was like, and it just was a slippery slope backwards. And so anytime you have a compulsion, sorry, I'm just going to get my daughter something. Anytime you have a compulsion, you have to stop the compulsion completely in order to be able to rewire that and get to a place where you can have a healthy relationship and you're in control of what you're doing. No longer are you being driven by this this need, I should, even when sometimes you don't want to, or just having it be another kind of red flag for if exercise has become a compulsion. If you put anything and everything aside to make sure that your exercise is fitting in your day. I used to cancel, social events. I would, and I'm sure you can relate to this, I would prefer to exercise and go out on a date with my husband. I would miss kids events, sporting events, plays, everything. It's like a drug. It had to come first before anything else.
Yeah.
And that's not how exercise should be in anyone's life ever. That's not how that's not a healthy way to live. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. So what I always think of when I'm thinking back to like how I did used to prioritize exercise was I was on a university placement in a seaside town, and people who I was studying with, they'd go out to the water park, they'd go out to the pub, and I would, I wasn't depressed. I had a group of friends. It wasn't like I was avoiding social situations for any reason other than the fact that I had this gym routine that I had to stick to, and it involved like walking to and from, and it was like so rigid. And the amount of exercise I did wasn't excessive. It was the fact that the urgency, the fact that it came before everything else, and it was a really miserable time. And going back to what you said about you have to cut it entirely out. So I live in the countryside, or I live in a city, but near the countryside. Everyone goes walking all the time. Really pretty. It's a nice area. But during my like actual cold turkey time, I would drive to the corner shop.
For you.
Yeah, and which isn't great for the planet, but short term, right?
But we need you around, so it's good that you did it. It's good that you're healthy and you can contribute in other ways during that time. Because yes, I understand that that's also an issue, that an argument that I'll have with people, or maybe a discussion about, but I can walk, it's much better for the environment, and I get that, but temporarily it's really okay to drive.
Well, part of the reason I was walking to the shop every day was because I was like obsessed with food still, because I had so much mental hunger. So actually I can drive to the shops once a week and be fine with the cupboard food that I've got. Or I can send my boyfriend if he wants to walk. He's fine. He doesn't need to rest as much as I do.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. And that's also probably good for rewiring too, because if anyone's like myself in recovery, when I was cold turkey, seeing other people go for walks or other people go out and exercise, I talked about a story when I was cold turkey. It was kind of the initial stages of it, and I was still crawling out of my skin when I had to choose that I'm not doing this. I remember watching my husband go out for a run, and I had to hold on to my son's bunk bed to keep myself from getting up and moving, because I knew that if I didn't sit and hold on to that bunk bed at that time, I would get up and start doing jumping jacks and burpees and all kinds of, I knew I had no control over my body in that moment. So I just had to grip that bunk bed. It was that intense. It was that pull to move when I saw other people moving was really intense. And in that moment, I think I realized, you need to be doing this. Like, you need to be cold turkey. Clearly this is a normal reaction to somebody going out for a run.
But it makes it hard, because obviously if you're trying to overcome exercise addiction, you say, oh, we'll do something sedentary, read a book, do some writing. But because your brain is screaming at you so much, it's hard to do anything that involves any like mental input.
So,
I did a lot.
What did you do?
what did I do? I did a lot of like collaging and card making.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So my go-to thing was like cleaning, but I realized that was also part of the, I need to be busy, I need to be doing things. So I sort of nipped that in the bud quite early. Yeah, there was a lot of Netflix, probably too much scrolling on my phone, which looking back now, maybe I'd have rather done something a little bit less like stressful.
Yeah.
But I started having baths again. That was a good
just
going and having bath.
When that was one thing that really worked for me too. And I was never like, I probably prior to recovery had taken, I don't know how many baths in my adult life, like maybe 5. Like I just never took baths. But I knew that if I got myself in like a warm bath, it would kind of calm my nerves, and I couldn't really do any exercise in a bath. So it was like, okay, this is a safe place for me to go to when I feel like I can't trust myself to stay still. Another thing that I would do was, I knew that there were these trigger points. I don't know if you can relate to this, but there were times in my day where the anxiety was extremely high and the urge to move was intense, right? So initially that would be like that gym time that I, when I stopped, I knew that time every day was when I would be at the gym. I dropped my kids off and then I would just drive home because I wasn't going to the gym anymore. And it was this terrifying, the discomfort felt like it was going to eat me alive. And so I had to have things planned during that time that I knew were going to keep me from moving. And one of those things that always had to be included was eating. And so not only was I resting, not only was I sitting, but I also knew that I had to be eating something challenging during that gym time. And that did some really good rewiring for me, because I feel like if you're just trying to pass the time and you're not allowing yourself to eat during that time, you're going to feel like you're going insane. Because the reason a lot of times that we're doing that movement is because it's filling time up from not being able to eat, right? So being able to do both is stopping the exercise and giving yourself that permission to eat during that time while sitting. So some things I would do while I was eating would be at Netflix. I'd call my sisters. I have a few sisters that are just really supportive and understood what I was going through. So I'd talk to them, be like, you're staying on the phone with me until we get through this, right? Things with your hands, right? Like crocheting, knitting, collaging, things like that, where you're right. It doesn't take a ton of focus. You don't have to it's not like making your brain hurt trying to think, really deep, but it's just something that you're kind of doing to keep your hands busy. So yeah, I think that those are good tools. Do you have anything else you can think of that was helpful to get you through?
So I'm thinking now, when it was, because often it was before work that I go and do the exercise. So yeah, I would plan in that I had to sit and do something, and often that was journaling. And I think I did similar to you, maybe not as structured, but often in the mornings at work. So after I would have gone to the gym and then gone to work, someone would have always baked, and I made a rule that if someone had baked, I had to have like rice of whatever they baked, which is actually really nice. I can't think. I did think of something else while you were talking, but another thing that I sort of like, I go through phases of thinking that I'd overcome it and cracked it and it was fine now, and then someone would say, oh, I just went for this run, and I'd be like, I can't hear that right now. And it's so funny how it sort of comes in waves, and just having that like toolkit to go back to of no, it's fine, I can still sit through this discomfort is so important, because I think that's where I went in the past. I like thought that I was doing fine, but actually that gives the eating disorder a foot in the door.
Makes you vulnerable to just be like, I'm fine, so I'm gonna go for that run with you because I'm fine. I'm fine, I can do this. Yeah, definitely. I
think so. What you were saying about like having to eat instead of just passing the time, like white knuckling it, there's a therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and that one of the like principles of that is sort of leaning into the discomfort and embracing it. And I realized that so much of my early recovery efforts were white knuckling. It was just gritting my teeth and trying to get through this experience and hating every second and waiting for it to pass, which doesn't, you're still then fighting it. You're still then telling yourself that this is an unacceptable thing to feel. Whereas actually, fine, I want to go for a run, whatever, it feels awful. How can I lean into that? And having a bit of cake is like the perfect way to lean into that, because it makes it everything feel worse in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's kind of like being passive versus aggressive. Passive would be like, oh, I'm just going to white knuckle and just going to get through because I can't go for that run. Aggressive is like, I'm not going for that run and I'm going to go get myself a piece of cake. And it feels terrifying, but in some ways it just helped me to feel like if I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Like I'm just going to get in and get this done. And I know exactly why I'm terrified of stopping exercise. And it's because I just freaking want to eat all day long. And so the faster that you can just embrace that and let yourself do that, the faster things are going to change in your brain. You're going to kind of settle into the idea of not exercising for a while. Another thing is that you gain confidence as you go, right? So you have that first encounter where someone's going out for a walk and you're not, and it's the most intense, awful feeling in the world. And you get through it. And then you think, okay, I live to tell about that. Phew. Whew. And then it happens again. And you're like, okay, I did that last time. I know I can get through it again. You kind of start building this confidence in your ability to say no. Now, if full recovery was that you had to do that for the rest of your life, anytime anyone went out and moved and you had to kind of talk yourself through it, that wouldn't be real recovery. You will eventually with time, and I don't know exactly what stage you're in, but eventually you'll get to a place where people can run circles around you and do jumping jacks right in front of your face while you're watching TV and ask them to move aside because you want to watch the show. Like you will not always feel that draw or that pull or that almost threatening feeling when people are going out to move. Oftentimes my husband will exercise after dinner, like after work. And that's usually when I'm pulling out some ice cream or eating some chocolate on the couch. Like, no, there's nothing there that's like making me feel like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be. How long's he? It doesn't, you will get to a point where it does not impact you anymore in a negative way.
I've realized that. So I've recently changed jobs and my current job is very much sitting in an office all day. And it's still interesting. It's not like mundane work, so I enjoy it. But I'm aware that I'm sitting down for much longer than I have been in any of my previous jobs. Right. And to begin with, that like still got on my nerves a bit. I was like, oh God, should I be doing something? Should I be going for a walk? But now, even after a few months of that, my partner will send me a text in the day and be like, oh, I've just gone for a however long run. And I'm like, oh, cool, good for you. And it doesn't bother me anymore, which is ludicrous. I never thought I'd get to that stage.
Yeah,
every now and then there's still niggles, but then I'm trying not to pathologize it too much because maybe I'm just thinking, oh my God, I've been staring at a screen for the last 7 hours. I need to like move out of these 4 walls, which I think is a reasonable thing to think. That doesn't have to be like, I need to go for a little jog to get fresh air. Like I can go and sit outside.
Right. Absolutely. Gosh, thank you. I'm so glad you just said that because that is one thing I hear. In fact, I just heard it again yesterday when I have the argument with people where, you know, I feel like there's like these phases of going cold turkey where it's like, hey, formal exercise, fine, I'll stop. You know, there's resistance, but they realize that's obvious, deliberate, can't do it. And then there's the walking. And it's like, you're telling me I can't walk, but I need fresh air, but I need to go out and get fresh air. And I'm like, so you do know there's benches at parks. There's places you can actually go outside and not have to walk and get fresh air. And I used to tell myself that same thing, letting go of a walk was just walking in general, like at all, walking to my mailbox. I've talked about how I would actually drive to my mailbox. It's kind of like up a street, literally maybe a 3-minute walk. Same thing with my kids to school. Most parents would walk their kids to school. My kids were young enough where I was not able to just send them on their own. So parents would walk, you know, their kids to school. I got in the car and drove my kids to school and drove back. And maybe people thought that was weird, but I knew I had to do that. Otherwise I would feel like I always had to have some kind of walk like that every single day, whether the kids had school or not. I know how my brain would have worked. And on the weekends, I would have been mimicking that same walk, right? Even if it was a 10-minute walk. And so the walking is so important that you give up. And then the next tier is like the lower level movement, like you mentioned, cleaning, right? Going to the stores every day. It's like, well, this is perfect because I'm getting all these, you know, foods that I'm, like you said, obsessed with, or making sure that you have all of your foods situated perfectly and always having the right supply out is really time consuming, but it's kind of a win for your eating disorder because then you're going to the store every day and you're moving. It gives you a chance to get out. So yeah, those are all things that I think are overlooked oftentimes, and people will just say, I'm not going to the gym anymore. Yeah, I'm not going on runs anymore. But there's so much more to unpack there. You've got to look at your life and ask yourself, am I doing anything that I feel like I have to do every day? Am I doing any kind of movement that if I don't do, it's causing me anxiety? And if the answer is yes, you have to stop.
Yeah, and the lower down the movement, the like more lower level movements it is, the more it's hard to unpick that and think, is that eating disorder related? Is that some other weird anxiety that I've got? So it's, for me, it was all tied in with like orderliness and cleanliness and like being the best, like most efficient person I could be. And so that isn't on the face of it eating disordered, but it definitely doesn't help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And probably if I'd never had an eating disorder, I'd never have those anxieties either. So there's no point just leaving that when that can then, you know, having to clean every day because you like a clean house turns into having to go to the shops every day because you like to have all of the things in your cupboards the right way. And then that turns into going for a walk every day. And it's just, yeah, it adds back up really quickly.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, another thing that I just, as you were talking, I remembered that I would do as well is before I was allowed to eat any meal, like any meal where I would sit down and actually allow myself to enjoy a decent amount of food, everything had to be done. All my chores, everything in the house, like laundry needed to be switched. I couldn't have anything that needed to like be folded pending. Beds needed to be made. Kitchen needed to be wiped down and cleaned. Family room needed to be picked up. If I needed to vacuum, do you know how much work I had to go through just to allow myself to sit down and eat a meal, right? And so again, if you're doing anything like that, maybe it to varying degrees, anything that is remotely related to what I just explained, you have to stop. Make it a goal to sit down and eat a meal with the dishes in the sink and the floor with tons of crumbs all over the place, and the family room has cushions on the floor and toys everywhere, and just let yourself eat. Food can come first. It's okay. It's good, especially in recovery. You've got to rewire your brain. You can eat under any circumstance.
Yeah, and food, even the food itself, like it doesn't have to be perfect. Like you can be eating a really ugly looking sandwich on a cracked plate with noise, and it's fine, because yeah, you're right, it's like that perfectionism that food is on a pedestal and it has to be the most important part of the day. It really doesn't.
Yep, absolutely. Sorry about my toddler in the background.
No, it's okay.
I forget, like, because I just listen to it all day long. I forget I'm doing a recording. People are probably like, can that baby in the background be quiet? I'm sorry if that's distracting.
Yeah, turn it down. No, I've zoned it out as well, so.
Well, good. So, and a lot of people that follow me are moms, and so hopefully they'll get it. So another thing that I wanted to ask you regarding exercise is when you did decide to go cold turkey, I'm assuming you weren't completely perfect at it. I'm sure that you probably had some instances where you gave in a little bit to that eating disorder, or you did something you know was probably not in line with your ultimate goal of recovery. What was your next action after you realized that? Did you just not really tell anyone? Did you just try to kind of correct it? Did you try to forget about it? Did you find yourself matching it each day? What was that like when you'd have what we'd call maybe a slip up?
So my I guess my like Achilles heel was step counting, either using the app on my phone or using my Fitbit or Garmin. And so quite early on, I like realized, no, I have to take this off. But then there were definitely occasions where either I'd wear the Garmin for whatever reason, or I'd check on my phone. And yeah, it was as if it was like a magnet. I then felt like I had to do it the next day, and I had to do it the next day, or I'd scroll back and realize that actually I wasn't hitting my step count, which is the goal anyways. So like, of course I wasn't hitting my step count because I wasn't exercising.
Yeah.
So
funny,
yeah,
sometimes you forget the goal, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're actually achieving the goal, then you freak out because you're not hitting your goal of, being good at your eating disorder. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I've been through times before and I've been like, oh my God, I've gained weight. It's like, yeah, that's
the goal.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, with the Garmin, some of the times I was working with a coach and I was doing like a habit tracker for her. And so if I said, oh, I've used my Garmin today, I've counted my steps, that was actually quite useful, of just being able to check in with her and sort of debrief it a little bit and just sort of reaffirm that, no, okay, that wasn't the best idea. I don't feel great about myself. I'll stop again tomorrow. But even so, sometimes it wouldn't make me feel bad about myself. Sometimes I'd be like, yes, I'm still hitting my step goal. I feel great. And that's almost harder, because then it's like, well, what's the point in me not checking my steps? And it like makes the behavior more ingrained. So I guess just having that, like, it was non-negotiable. Like each day I just reset. If I check my steps, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that tomorrow. Because yeah, it was really serious how it adds up.
Oh, sorry. Right. So I love the, like, when you would acknowledge that you had checked your steps and you could go and talk to someone about it. I think that's a really important tool, that if every time that you have a slip up, you go and talk to someone about it. Something about that is teaching or telling your brain, I know I did something I was not supposed to do, and I'm talking through it, and I'm going to remove the shame around it, because shame leads to more secrecy and more sneakiness and more guilt and just a downward spiral of I suck, I can't do that.
Thrive in it, in the secrecy.
Right. So you've got to, even if it's the smallest little thing, right? It's like, even if it's I remember my husband was kind of my accountability person in that regard. And it would be like, I walked to the mailbox today. And I just have to say it. I just walked to the mailbox today. I mean, you realize, like I said, it's a 3-minute walk there and back. And I felt like I had to tell him, because if I didn't, do you know what I would do the next day? I'd walk to the mailbox, and then I'd go a longer route. And then the next day I'd do something else. I just knew I had to just nip it in the bud immediately. And by talking about it and him be like, oh, why do you think you did that? I don't know. I just, for some reason, convinced myself it was not a big deal. I thought it was fine. I see now it's been weighing on my mind all day. I knew I shouldn't have done it. I'm feeling more anxious. I feel like I want to go for a real walk now, blah, blah, blah. I'd say all of it. And then I kind of, all right, tomorrow recommitting, not going to happen. So absolutely. When you have a slip up,
did he just respond like purely like factual, like, oh, why did you do that?
Yeah, he figured, I think he realized it was more so like me just talking it out without him having to react was enough for me. Like him just being that voice of reason. You know, I do think you did that, you know, okay, so you're going to commit tomorrow, not doing it. Yes, I'm going to. So it wasn't like slapping my wrist saying, why are you doing that? Why, you said you weren't going to. It wasn't like a condemnation. It was just a, like, I got to own the fact that I did this and I'm not happy about it. You know, and after he'd ask questions too, like, well, how did that make you feel when you got back? I'm like, well, I felt like I got away with something. You know, I felt like I wasn't going to tell anyone. It wasn't that big of a deal. It's nice to move my legs even just for a few minutes. And then I quickly reminded myself, like, I want to recover. What am I doing? Right. So I was like able to kind of snap back into it. But I knew if I didn't just tell you that, then, so I'd already kind of come to the realization that I had done something wrong and I wanted to mend it. But I felt like I needed to be responsible and just kind of put that out into the ethers of somebody knowing that I had done that, so that it was likely then the following days, and like, hey, did you make sure you didn't walk to the mailbox? Yeah, I did. I made sure I didn't. And that just kind of got me back on track really fast. So
that actually reminded me of a situation. So yeah, it wasn't actually that early on. It was after I thought that I'd sort of cracked the majority of the exercising behaviors. But I was feeling incredibly anxious one day, and I'd seen that one of my friends had gone for a run. They posted on social media, and that it was like this perfect storm. And so I ended up going to the gym and doing a 5K, which is like, you know, and I would never do that in my healthy self. Like, I hate running on a treadmill; it's awful. So I went and did that, and I was like, oh God, this is like you said, I felt like I got away with something, but also I felt like I'd done something wrong. And I just came home and I spoke to Billy about it, and he was like, oh, why did you do that? Like, completely no judgment in it. And I was like, well,
non-emotional, just let's talk about it. Yeah,
and I guess that sort of showed me that I'm not infallible. I can still slip up even at this more late stage. But yeah, it was definitely like a feeling of letting something go. I felt like I'd done something really bad. So when I told him, it was almost like a relief to be like, I did this thing and I feel bad about it.
Right. Whereas if you didn't, perhaps you're like, oh my gosh, I got away with that. I didn't have to tell anyone. Now I know in the future, if I'm having a bad day or I'm feeling really tempted, I can kind of just go do that. And then no one will have to know. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to do it every day. And then it turns into a huge monster. So yeah, so important, as small as it is, that you tell someone. Find that person that you can trust, that you know isn't going to slap your wrist, but it's going to just talk you through, you know, a game plan. Okay, how are you gonna make sure you don't do that again? Yeah, perfect. Once you decided to go cold turkey, were the initial few days, can you talk to me about that experience? Were the first few days the hardest? Did it get harder with time? Did you start to settle into it? I know everyone kind of experiences this a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think, like the fact that it doesn't suddenly get easier and easier until it's completely gone. It like comes in waves. I think the discomfort came in waves as well. So the first few days were almost like this honeymoon phase. Like, you know, when you go all in with food and you're like, oh my God, I can eat a cookie. I can eat a piece of cake. I can eat another cookie. Like, this one was like, I can sit on the sofa
And
this is
rest. I'm so
amazing.
tired.
Yeah, and I was so tired. It's so funny how your body's like, right, well, I'm just going to catch up on like 10 years of sleep now. So yeah,
very
that was
normal.
okay for the first few days.
Right.
And then the niggles started to come in. It's like, well, come on, you've done this for a week now, you've done this for 2 weeks now, like, and the longer it went, the more I was like, you really can't justify doing this anymore. You know, you're a healthy weight, whatever.
Right.
It's completely healthy to exercise. All of these thoughts constantly keeping going.
Right.
And another ACT tool was the fact that rather than like trying to argue with all of the thoughts, because obviously it's fine for most people to go and walk or go and exercise. Like, I'm not going to say exercising is unhealthy, but I just like let the thoughts come and pass. I was like, okay, that's another thought about exercise. That's another thought that I should be doing things. Okay, another one. Oh God, they're sending a lot of thoughts
again.
away.
Yep.
So that it was sort of like, it came and went. It was in waves.
And it felt probably really persistent, those thoughts, right? Because for so long you've been conditioned that if you have that thought, you get up and go, you move. Like, as soon as you have a thought of feeling lazy, I'm sure your sneakers are on, you're going for a walk prior to cold turkey. So as those thoughts are coming and you're responding in a different way, there comes that discomfort. There comes that feeling of, I'm doing something wrong. This can't be okay. This is not what people should be doing. And especially after those couple of weeks when probably a walk does sound nice, right? Going out for a stroll, moving your legs, it feels really convincing that it's a good idea to go and do that. But it's not, because the idea of not doing it still does what to your brain? It makes you feel crazy, right? It makes you feel very uneasy. Therefore, you have to continue on with the period in which you need to be completely abstaining from all movement.
Yeah, exactly.
So
what sort of convinced me was the fact that it wasn't anything. What convinced me that they weren't thoughts that I needed to sort of think about factually was the fact that it was completely dependent on my internal state. If I was having a great day and great things were happening, I'd have a couple of thoughts about exercise and I'd be like, oh no, that's fine because I'm doing this and this is interesting and I'm talking to this person. If I was having a terrible day and I felt really sad, I was desperate to go for a walk or go to the gym. And so it was just the fact that I'd learned that this is how I deal with any sort of negative feeling or any sort of boredom or any sort of downtime. I exercise.
Right. But those are the days, Kaz, those are the days when you're having a miserable, just crappy day. Woe is me. Everything's going wrong. I'm crawling down on my skin. I hate the way my body feels. My boss just yelled at me. My boyfriend's mad at me. I upset my friend. My mom just said I hurt her feelings last year. Blah, blah. All these things are just piling up on you. You just feel like an awful person. Those are the days when you can stay strong with your commitment, that you're not going out and moving your body, are the days when things happen. That's where the rewiring happens.
Yeah.
Obviously on those days that are flowing and feel great and everything, like, yes, there's still some rewiring happening. That's great that you're not moving, but it's those days that feel so incredibly hard that you stick it out and think, no, I'm not giving in. That's where real confidence comes from. And that's where things change in your brain. So those days they're good, even though they feel awful when you have them. So we can't avoid or prevent those. It's just, I see them having a day and here's a great opportunity for me today to really do some great rewiring.
And because I'd never sat with those feelings before, they always felt like the worst feeling in the world. But actually, when you've sat through them, you realize, okay, that was like a 7 out of 10 of badness. Whereas I thought in the past it was a 10 out of 10 because I'd let it get to 7 and then I'd be going for that run. Whereas
exactly.
Actually it gets to the 7 and then it goes back down again. And same with like days when you've got bad body image. I always thought, well, if I have a slice of cake and I've already got bad body image, I'm going to feel a million times worse. Whereas actually, if you have the cake, you feel crap, but you felt crap anyway. You don't feel worse.
Right.
Maybe you do feel worse, but it's
better.
Exactly.
I just did something that's going to help me in my recovery.
Yeah, and you've gotten over the anticipation, because that was one of the worst things for me. Imagining how bad I was going to feel when I didn't run, when I didn't go to the gym, when I had that cake.
Right. Yeah. It's really important to learn firsthand. You can be told this all day long, but until you experience firsthand that you can actually experience a lot of really uncomfortable feelings and you could even get to a 10 out of 10 discomfort or anxiety level.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go out and move for that to come back down.
Yeah.
As you sit through that over and over and over and over, and you realize that feeling actually passed. Yes, I cried, and yes, I had a tantrum, and yes, I screamed and yelled and I pouted, but like that feeling, I processed it and it's passed. Like it came back down. It will not rise and rise and rise and rise. Like it feels like it's going to, if you don't get up and move, it won't. Eventually it's going to kind of peak, and then it's going to have to come back down. So remember that when you're sitting there feeling like you're going nuts, crawling out of your skin, really not liking how you feel, stick it out, and you're going to learn through experience, this does come back down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Very good. So Kaz, where would you say that you feel like you're at now with exercise? You sound like you brought it back in.
Yeah.
How did you know when you were ready to do that? What made you feel like, I think it's time?
Do you know what? I was so apprehensive. I was thinking, is this the right time? But I think what I did was the exercise I started with was social things. It was if my friend said, oh, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to go for a walk to the pub? That was the best, because that's got food and social and very separate from what the eating disorder would want, because that like thrives on the solitude and the like regimented thing. I can't be saying, right, we've got to walk faster, we've got to go the long way back.
And you're engaging in conversation rather than fixating on your steps.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to begin with to introduce exercise that I hadn't done before. So like I'd never really been a swimmer. So I thought I'll try swimming, because I've never really like counted my lengths or anything. But it turns out I found that quite boring. So that didn't stick around very long.
Yeah.
Which in itself was interesting, being able to let an exercise go if I don't enjoy it.
Right. Not feeling like, no, I have to do it. I have to do it. I'm going to figure out a way to like it. Yeah.
I set myself some rules. So if I feel like I don't want to exercise, obviously I don't.
Good.
If it would impede on any other part of my day, so if it would mean that I would be rushing to do something else later, or I wouldn't have time to do something earlier, the exercise is the first thing to go. And where possible, so yeah, this is moving on a few like months now, but where possible, I still exercise with someone. So I've started climbing. That's quite a social sport.
Yeah.
I do occasionally go out like on my own, but again, I make sure that that's something that isn't going to impede on anything else in my day.
Right. Yeah. I did the exact same thing. So I started out with exercises or activities that I hadn't done before. So I went and bought like a set of rollerblades. I just thought, we live by a lake here, and I thought like a grown woman rollerblading, why not? Like, I think this sounds like fun. So I got rollerblades, and my husband had always wanted to rock climb with me. And in the past I wouldn't do it because I didn't like it burns enough calories. It wasn't intense enough.
You're sitting around like looking at the wall and stuff. It's like, that's not,
yeah,
that's
I'm
not
like,
exercise.
I'm not belaying you. I got to be working out. And it's like, no, actually do that. We take turns here. Right. So that type of thing I started doing and really enjoyed. But as I shifted from doing things with people or groups to doing it myself, because again, I felt like I was in a good place, but I just didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to revert back to any old behaviors. And so what I did was, if I was going out for a walk by myself or something, I would just shoot a text to my husband. Hey, I'm just going to go out for a walk. I'll let you know when I get back. I just needed a little bit of accountability. And what I found really quickly was like, I have no problem going back when I want to. I have no problem going for a nice leisurely walking, coming back. And it was so reassuring to be like, oh, I was so worried that I was going to become psycho about this walk, and not a big deal. Like, I just came back. And so put those barriers in place, just better to be safe than sorry. And then if you don't need them, great. Right. But don't go into this thinking, I got this, I'm fine, I don't need any help, I don't need any more accountability, and I can do it, because it's time for me to go back into this. You have to be really, really conscientious and kind of, like I said, better safe than sorry. And then if you don't need those things, cool, you don't need them.
Yeah. But there's no like set route to do it. So, there's been plenty of times when I think I've been unsure and thought, oh, actually, am I doing this for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And it's just like constant learning process of like, if I feel like I've let the eating disorder in a little bit, I'll be like, okay, well, I'm just going to take a break for a little while, just reset some boundaries. Because it's really hard to know exactly what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
The magic answer or anything.
Yeah, there is not just an equation that works for everyone, and you learn as you go. right? And sometimes it's happened where I'm working with a client and we feel like it's time to start incorporating some movement again.
Yeah.
And what we find out really quickly is that it was too soon.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where working with someone or having, open conversations with your accountability person is helpful, because then you can kind of pull back and you have another kind of objective opinion here of like, hey, I think we started this too soon. Time to kind of hold off a little bit and then go back. For some people, it's like they're totally ready, and it proves that they're ready, right? As you bring it back in, they have all the good mental state markers around movement. They're not having any obsessive thoughts anymore. So it's just so different for each individual, given their history, given their intensity with it, given the stage that they're at in their own recovery and their healing. So it's just, there's not a cookie cutter answer for it, for sure.
And one more thing was that for me, having like sports nutrition and dietary foods around exercise was such a big thing that now I've like completely like, even if it's something that would be fine to have, I'm just like, no, if I go and exercise, I'm having a bag of crisps when I get back, or I'm having like a slice of toasted peanut butter, just something, a normal food that anyone would pick up. I'm not going to go to the shop and buy a protein shake or something.
Right. That actually reminds me of something I don't think I've ever talked about, but I remember the first time I went back to like a group class at a gym with a lot of my friends. I went and I was like, this is a really safe environment. It's like a bunch of moms. We went to this group class, and afterwards I remember walking out and I'm like, I'm going to get donuts. Does anyone want to go get donuts with me? And they all looked at me like I was absolutely insane. Like, we just worked out, you're going to go get donuts. But I was like, yeah, like, don't donuts sound good? Like the link of food and exercise was like no longer there at all. Like the thought didn't even cross my mind. Oh, we just worked out, I got to go get a protein shake. It was like, dude, donuts sound good. And everyone said no. Yeah. And I just got in the car and I drove myself to my favorite donut shop and got some donuts and ate them. And I was like, I love this. Like, I just remember feeling like, I love this. I love that I can go exercise because it feels good. And I love that I can go eat donuts because they're good as well. Yeah. So yeah, definitely you've got to, if you start exercising and you start noticing that you're starting to gravitate towards this kind of orthorexic type food again, catch yourself. Maybe for a while it is that you need to eat donuts after you work out every single time, just to reinforce to your brain, these two things don't have to be linked: healthy eating and exercise.
Yeah. And like, I feel good physically, like eating foods that I thought were junk. Like, I think we've all been sold this idea that you have to eat this really orthorexic diet if you're going to be a fit and healthy person, and it's just money. It's just so that people can make money by selling their like healthy cereal bars or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Like if you've burnt off energy, your body wants a donut or it wants a protein bar. It's not going to really care what the difference is. Right. Listen to your mental hunger. Just eat whatever it is that you're feeling after movement. That's always going to be the right answer. All right, Kaz, well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add? I'm just like so grateful to you for sharing your experience. I feel like the exercise component isn't always talked about enough from people who have experience with it. And I feel like I can only talk about it so much because I want more people's stories. Everybody experiences it differently. And so, yeah, I think it was great that you were able to share your, recent experience having given it up. And I remember, because I follow you on Instagram, and I remember watching the struggle with it, and still like that you were walking, and I just can't wait for the day when she just decides to do it. I just can't wait until she just goes full turkey. I remember somebody sending me a message sort of at the start of COVID when I first went on this journey, and they were like, you are walking a lot. So a lot of your stories are you on walks. And I was like, no, don't be silly. Yeah. all on walks. I was walking way too much. Right. And I definitely noticed that, obviously, like you pick up on that kind of thing. And it's just like, man, I can't wait till she gets some proper recovery, because you're going to nail it once you do. And so I'm so glad that you just decided, hey, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to give it up. And you did. And you're doing so awesome. Like, really, genuinely, you seem like a different person. In a good way. Really good. Yeah. No, I feel like so many things I thought were just part of my personality. I thought that I was just this really rigid, highly strung person. And actually so much of that was just symptoms of being in an energy deficit and being like stuck in this orthorexic mindset. So, I mean, I'm still fairly highly strung, but maybe less so.
I think, you know what though, I think like, and I am as well. And I think like type A personality is type A personality. Recovering from an eating disorder is going to turn your personality to something else.
Yeah.
But when you're on when you have an eating disorder, type A personality is like on steroids. It's like a person that no one wants to be around because you're so uptight.
Oh,
and so you can still have your personality. If you happen to be a naturally kind of more uptight person, you can be that without having your eating disorder.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fun to see people's personalities come out, and you still have flaws. I'm sure you do. I had a ton, like when I fully recovered, it's like, wait a second, hold on a second. I thought I was supposed to be more patient, like totally more patient. And I still like, probably I'm more patient now than I was when I had an eating disorder, but that's still kind of a tendency that I naturally happen to be a bit impatient and kind of feisty. And so there's things about me possibly that are attributes to my personality, but they're me. It's me, right? It's just
exactly. It's not been hijacked by the
disorder.
eating disorder.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Becky.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaz. It was great to have you on, and you're just doing awesome. Well done. Awesome. You're really inspiring to the recovery community, and keep it up. Keep up all the hard work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really hope that, I don't know, our chat helps.
Oh, I'm sure it will help a ton of people. Thanks so much. Have a good day. See you, Kaz.
Bye.